Okay, I really don't need to go to the thrift store for like 3 years. One of these days, I really have to do something with this old drawer. That's a maybe. What is that? Winter has fully arrived in the Midwest this week, making it nearly impossible for me to get out to the thrift stores. So, we're going to turn this snowy setback into a creative challenge. We're going to rummage through my existing thrift store finds to create some unique DIY projects. I have a few nicer items, but I also have a pile of random things that I'm hoping to turn into a lovely piece of spring decor.
And I can't wait for you to see what I do with this peacock lamp.
So, if you're ready to join me on this weather induced challenge, let's get started.
I decided to start with this metal cloche, whose previous owner was apparently using it to display a small action figurine, probably because they weren't sure what to do with it either. The light green color was fine, but I thought some white wax would brighten it up. I just brushed it on and dabbed off the excess with a paper towel. I thought it would make a cute terrarium, so I hot glued a small square of styrofoam in the center of the stand, and then I began adding a variety of greenery stems to the styrofoam. I put the tallest stems in the back, a succulent in the front, and then added some droopy stems to hang over the side. And finally, I just filled in with a few short and medium length stems. Once I was happy with the arrangement, I glued some moss to cover the sides of the styrofoam and the bottom of the tray. Once the cloche was back in place, I added a stick across the middle. I used the wire sticking out from the underside of a fake bird to hold the bird to the stick and also to hold the stick to the cloche. To add some additional interest, I added a faux vine and wrapped it around the stick and then up and around the top of the cloche. I loved the size and shape of this wicker tray, but the 1990s fabric had to go. Luckily, it was barely attached with just a little bit of dried out hot glue. I could have left the bare wood, but I wanted to dress it up with a design. First, I painted the inside of the tray with one coat of white chalk paint. Then I grabbed some William Morris paper napkins that I purchased recently at HomeGoods. They were 3-ply, so I pulled away the 2 white plies and then centered the pattern ply in the tray. I lifted up half of the napkin and brushed Mod Podge over the tray and then carefully lowered the napkin using my paintbrush to smooth out any wrinkles. Then I repeated this process on the remaining half of napkin. I cut small strips from a second napkin to fill in the empty spots along each side. Once the Mod Podge was dry, I used a utility knife along the inner edge of the tray to remove the excess napkin. The napkin tore a bit in one area, so I just applied a small piece of napkin over that spot. To seal the napkin, I applied a thick coat of Mod Podge Hard Coat, but you could also apply 2 to 3 coats of regular Mod Podge. I loved how the green and brown pattern looked against the wicker and decided to add even more green by gluing some grosgrain ribbon over the handles. For a durable hold, I used fabric glue, and let me tell you, that ribbon is not coming off anytime soon. I bought this Rooster Art for the pretty painted frame, not for the cheap plastic rooster. The frame was screwed to a small shadow box, so I removed the screws and popped off the box. Then I used a small screwdriver to pop off the rooster. I save almost everything, but that rooster went straight in the trash. To cover the chicken wire paper, I cut out a piece of scrapbook paper to fit inside the box and then just adhered it with a good quality glue stick. I decided to add some flowers and fruit from a thrifted floral swag to coordinate with the design on the frame. I hot glued a small piece of styrofoam in the corner of the box and then added a faux artichoke. I cut down some floral stems and stuck them in the styrofoam and filled in with some berries and a pomegranate. I wanted the leaves and flowers to stick out over the frame, so I did not reattach the piece of glass. Here's a little tip. If you have some faux leaves that are beginning to unravel, just trim off the edges with scissors and they'll look good as new. I bought this mirror a couple months ago thinking I might use it in my son's bedroom makeover, but I didn't, so here it is collecting dust. Although I usually like stained wood, for some reason I just didn't care for the look of this particular wood, so I decided to paint it. I applied 2 coats of an off-white chalk paint. When the paint was dry, I lightly sanded over it and distressed the edges. Because chalk paint is thick, you really need to lightly sand it to get a smooth finish. I decided to embellish the mirror with some bird and floral designs cut from another package of Home Goods napkins. This time I used small scissors to carefully cut around the designs rather than applying the entire napkin. Because the paper is so thin, the edges almost completely disappear when you brush over the design with a top coat of Mod Podge. Once the Mod Podge was dry, I sealed the chalk paint by brushing on a coat of clear wax and wiping away the excess with a paper towel. I thought it would only be appropriate to add a bird's nest to the little drawer. I didn't hesitate in buying this Peacock Lamp when I saw it, but once I got it home, I really didn't have a spot for it. So let's turn it into a small table. First, I removed the lamp parts and pulled out the cord. It may not have been necessary, but I glued a couple wood rounds to the bottom to add extra stability and extra height. I used wood glue to attach them to the lamp base and filled in the gaps with caulk. I also added a few brad nails to the larger round to attach it to the smaller one. To create a tabletop, I first inserted a wood dowel into the body of the lamp. I chose one that fit very snugly. I cut it down, leaving about a half an inch sticking out the top. Then I cut out a paper pattern so I could mark the center on a wood round and drilled a hole in that spot using a drill bit the same size as the dowel rod. I filled the hole with wood glue and sat the wood round on top of the dowel rod. Then I glued a second, larger wood round on top of that. I didn't get it on camera, but I drilled a center hole and drove a wood screw through the hole all the way into the dowel rod. And then I attached the 2 wood rounds with some brad nails to hold everything in place while the glue dried. I filled in the holes on the tabletop with wood putty, and when everything was dry, I brushed a primer on the wood rounds, both on the base and on the top of the lamp. And when the primer was dry, I painted over it with some dark brown paint that I had on hand. The tail of the Peacock lamp had become detached from the lamp base. I superglued it, but it came detached again. So I tried Bondic, a resin glue that I had recently purchased from Amazon. Bondic is a thin, light-sensitive liquid. Once UV light hits the Bondic, it hardens, welding things together. It's supposed to work on almost any material, and it definitely worked on this peacock. After the brown paint was dry, I brushed it with antiquing wax and wiped away the excess. The wax adds dimension and provides a protective coat. To unite the appearance of the wood rounds with the lamp, I used my finger to apply some gold rub-and buff around some of the edges. I also brushed some of the gold wax on the peacock to make it stand out from the brown branch stand. I bought this little wagon a few years ago and used the wood blocks that came with it. So I decided I needed to either use the wagon today in a project or donate it back to the thrift store. Initially, I painted the plastic wheels with a mixture of baking soda and black chalk paint, and painted the wagon with moss green chalk paint. However, even painted black, the wheels still looked really juvenile. They were bolted in, and there was just no easy way to remove them, so I hammered them off. A few small pieces of wood broke off too, which I ended up filling with wood putty. For new wheels, I used the small wood rounds that I had previously removed from 4 bottle brush trees at Christmas time. I attached each wood round with a single brad nail. Since it's just for decoration, it doesn't matter to me that the wheels don't move. I replaced the red pull string with a strand of jute, and finally I hunted through my wicker baskets and found one that fit the wagon perfectly. I also cut down the stems of some thrift store flowers and added them to the basket. I've also had this black wood basket for a long time. I spray painted it green, and I could have just added a plant to it, but I wanted to use it in an unexpected way. I wanted to remove the handle, but there were tiny nails holding it in place, so I ended up having to cut off the top inch of the 2 side supports and then re-drilling new holes. I chose a smaller dowel rod that could slide through the holes and be removed. I painted the dowel rod to match the basket, and when the paint was dry, I slid on a ball of twine. I recently received a Grandin Road catalog and was inspired by their spring topiaries, but they cost almost $300. So I collected up a pile of wood and metal items that I thought I could use to make my own topiary. I started by using wood glue to join two bamboo salad bowls together to create a ball shape for the base. Then I grabbed a wood bowl that had originally held a poured candle inside, and I glued that to the top of the salad bowls, and I set the bowls aside to let the glue dry. Next, I grabbed a metal vase, removed the foam that was glued to the bottom, and used a combination of E6000 and hot glue to attach the vase to the bottom of a small metal bowl, and then I set those aside to dry. About an hour later, I began painting everything with chalk paint in various shades of blue, green, and white. I also painted a finial that initially I had attached to a Dollar Tree foam ball, but then I got the idea to use a plastic Christmas ornament in place of the ball. I drilled a hole in the top center, applied some E6000 around the hole, and screwed the finial into the hole. Then I used some hot glue to fill in the gap around the base of the finial. Next, I applied E6000 inside the top of the vase and applied hot glue next to that and inserted the ornament. And then I painted the ornament with white chalk paint. The next step was to use some Gorilla Glue to attach the metal bowl to the wood bowl. You know I'm a big fan of caulk, so once everything was dry, I applied a bead of caulk to the joints where the parts were joined together. I wanted to apply some rub-on transfers to the topiary, so I first brushed on a coat of glossy Mod Podge to seal the paint and create a smooth surface for the transfers. I ordered 3 different sets of Prima transfers from Amazon so that I would have a variety to choose from. I applied the transfers primarily to the white sections where they would show up best. I'd love to know which of today's projects was your favorite. And if you enjoy upcycling projects like these, here's another video I think you may like.